Take a deep breath in. And as you breathe in a resourceful feeling of relaxation. And as you exhale, just get a sense that tension, stress, worries are leaving your body in your outward breath. With your eyes closed, notice that you can give more of your attention to the sound of my voice. Your mind will naturally, effortlessly turn words into meanings and meanings into representations. Those representations could be thoughts that turn into movies that give you an idea of an alternative reality that represents what is true for you. And what is true for you is all that matters. Your beliefs don't need to be true for anyone else, they just need to be true for you. What you value isn't necessarily what other people value. But if things like freedom, connection, are valuable to you, that's the only person that matters. Continue to breathe in and breathe out and just get a sense that it's time to let go of some of these things you've been holding on to. You still have fears that are linked to things that happened a long time ago, and you don't need to hold on to them anymore. You've acquired the wisdom, the lessons, the insight, so you can let go of those fears now. Any feelings of anger, frustration, you can let those go too. And as you start to let go of those things that no longer serve you, isn't it worth exploring your biggest fear? I want you to use the power of your imagination to imagine a grey building in the middle of vast countryside. This building is surrounded by a courtyard. The courtyard is surrounded by a very tall wall, and on top of that wall is barbed wire, security cameras, maybe even a tower where there is people with rifles. I want you to get a sense that this is a prison. I want you to imagine that you are in this prison, in a tiny cell, surrounded by long hallways, lots of metal bars, and that building itself is then surrounded by an even bigger wall with the wire and with those guards that are armed. I want you to get a sense that this prison does give you certain things. Although you can't get out, nothing else can get in. In many ways, there is a sense of security linked to this prison. There's certainty. You're going to get the same food at the same times every day. You'll wake up at the same time and fall asleep at the same time. Have your breaks at the same time. I want you to get a sense that perhaps there was a time in your life where you needed security. You needed things to be predictable. You needed things to have an element of certainty. Perhaps because there was a time in your life where things were unpredictable. You didn't have certainty. Perhaps things were volatile, and for a while, that prison, perhaps of your own making, seemed desirable. And because you lived in that prison for such a long time, Isn't it natural that you would crave the opposite of that existence? The opposite of isolation is connection. The opposite of feeling trapped and imprisoned is infinite freedom. In a prison, you're not in control. Other things, perhaps even your own emotions, are controlling you. But outside the prison, isn't it natural there would be a desire to be the one in control? I want you to get a sense that real responsibility is the key to freedom. But responsibility isn't what most people think it is. Responsibility isn't things you have to do, chores, burdens that you have to carry. Real responsibility is to live a life on your terms and to respond to the world in the way that takes you closer to the life that you want. Nobody's definition of a good life matters, only yours. I want you to get a sense that these walls of this prison can come crumbling down. One of the walls is certainty. And the wall will come crumbling down when you appreciate that the world can be unpredictable and that there are so many things that you're not in control of. Trying to control something uncontrollable is about as useful as trying to control the weather with your mind. And when it comes to the weather, you don't try and control the weather, you just respond to the weather. You know that the weather can be unpredictable. So you wear the appropriate clothing and you make choices as to whether or not to go outside or stay inside, depending on that weather. I want you to imagine you are now in the courtyard of this prison, and the moment that you accept that a consequence of freedom is uncertainty and unpredictability, then notice that that wall comes crumbling down. The guards look confused. That wall isn't there anymore. There is certainty inside the prison. There is lots of uncertainty and unpredictability outside the prison. I want you also to get a sense that control is one of these walls of this prison. To be in a prison is to be controlled. To leave the prison means that you have more control, but not infinite control. In a prison, the boundaries are set for you. Outside of a prison, in a world full of freedom, you have the responsibility to set your own boundaries. And some people find that difficult because they don't know what their own boundaries are. How can you communicate a boundary if you don't know what it is? And therefore, you need to ask yourself the question, what am I willing to accept? And what am I not willing to accept? Boundaries aren't what you hold in your head, they're what you tolerate. Anything in life, whether it's disrespect or anything else, you'll get more of it if you tolerate it. And sometimes feeling that you have a voice, the confidence to communicate when things are or are not acceptable, is useful to communicate boundaries in advance and articulate forcefully, like the guard with the gun, if those boundaries are crossed without your consent. And once you're willing that the wall of control comes with a requirement for you to establish boundaries as to what is and is not acceptable. These are your boundaries, no one else's. Then notice that wall of control comes crumbling down. Another wall in this prison is disconnection. When the wall is there, you're separated from other people. You have that isolation, which means you're only left with yourself and your own thoughts to deal with. But when that wall of disconnection and isolation comes crumbling down, it's because you accept that connection is out there in the real world, and that vulnerability is crucial to true connection. Sharing personal experiences, really listening to people, caring about other people's lives and what matters to them will build strands of connection between your soul and other souls. Disconnection and isolation is fine in the prison, but it's not okay in the real world. Some people can feel alone, surrounded by thousands of people. Some people can feel that they have everyone in the world that they need with just a few loyal friendships. I want you to get a sense that the moment that you accept that freedom requires connection, would you really want to be free if you were isolated on a desert island with no people? True freedom is only true freedom when you're connected to those people that share the same values and way of looking at the world that you do. And when you accept that this connection is crucial to a life of freedom, notice that third wall comes crumbling down. I want you to get a sense that right now there is nothing holding you into this prison. And the only thing stopping you from leaving the prison is a security guard with a gun. I want you to accept that you're not in control of that gun. He could choose to fire it, or he could choose not to fire it. Is fully out of your control. When you're willing to accept that you would have the opportunity to have freedom with all of the risks attached, then the certainty of no freedom, then it means you have courage. I want you to feel that courage deep inside you and walk towards these walls that have crumbled down to rubble, knowing that at any point the guard could fire the gun, and yet you're still going to walk out of this prison anyway, is the very courage and accepted needed to face the free world. Because in the free world, you're not in control of the motives of every person. While the majority of people are good, there's still some bad people out there. And trying to control things that you can't control means that you don't deserve freedom. True freedom is knowing that bad things will happen and it won't stop you living your life. Setbacks will happen, failures will happen, and you're strong and resilient enough to pick yourself up and keep going anyway. True freedom is knowing that the key limitations are not set by the world, but by your own mind. And therefore, the only way that you can test what is real limitations is to assume that you have none. Let the world show you your limitations, and then set your sights on proving them wrong. Nothing will stop you unless you allow it to stop you. Walk past the rubble. The guard never fired the shot. You find yourself walking out into the world, and at any point in time you could choose to return to this prison cell, that boring, monotonous, predictable life of safety and security, but that's not a life. Are you an animal that wants to live in a zoo, knowing that you get food every day, healthcare if you need it? Or do you want to live out there in the wild, in the forests, in the oceans, in the mountains, in the plains? It's not predictable, but it is magical. And trust your intuition that you have the resources to deal with whatever life throws your way. You can handle it. It's time to return to the present now, as you realize that all of this is just thoughts within thoughts, ideas within ideas, dreams within dreams, and actually you're firmly in the present, listening to my voice. Take a deep breath in through your nose and out through your nose. Just wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, and very soon I will count from 1 to 10 to awaken you. You will awaken having a huge amount of trust in your own resources, accepting those things you can't control, but taking responsibility for those things you can, deciding to have a life that is intentional, and knowing that you can handle whatever life throws your way, starting to count to awaken you. 1, 2, 3, waking up. 4, 5, 6, more alert. 7, 8, open your eyes, open your eyes. 9, 10, wide awake, wide awake, wide awake.